Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Appraisal Buzzcast. My name is Jim Morrison. I'm going to bring in our host, Hal Humphreys. Hey, Hal, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jim. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, we have a great topic today, and one every appraiser is going to want to watch. It's something they are talking about all over social media. We're talking about appraisal waivers. Let me bring in our guest, Kenon Chen, who's going to be talking about this with us. Hey, Kenon, how are you doing?
Hey, doing good. It's good to see you all. Good to be on here. Thank you.
Kenon's the EVP of Strategy and Growth at Clear Capital. So, Kenon, we really appreciate you joining us today.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So, Kenan, you and I have spoken in the not too distant past on this podcast. I think most of our listeners know who you are. I certainly know who you are. Thank you for taking the time to be with us again. I do want to kind of dive right into the topic of the day, which is appraisal waivers. FHFA just released some new policies that will affect the appraisal industry. Can you give us a definition of what that means?
Sure. So the FHFA just a couple weeks ago announced really three changes at the same time that affect the appraisal industry. Number one, they increased the eligibility of appraisal waivers. So full appraisal waivers, they increased for purchase loans specifically. They moved it from 80 LTV to 90 LTV. The second thing they did was that they increased eligibility for inspection-based waivers. Now, these are waivers that require a property data collection to be performed, and they moved that again for just purchase loans from 80 LTV to the standard buy box that the GSEs have, which is up to 97 LTV. The third thing they did, which we don't talk about too much, but they also expanded their partnership with the FHA to include the FHA appraisal data set inside of the uniform appraisal data set that the FHFA has access to, where they do, analysis of appraisal data and research. So, but I know we'll probably get more into the waiver change today, but I think that's important too, right? Because a lot of these programs have come into place because of having all this appraisal data that they're doing research and analysis on and making decisions as to how they might change the loan process based on what they find.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. I do know that most of the conversation is around appraisal waivers, but the expansion of the data set to include FHA is actually a critical piece of the equation. Kenan, let's do this. I'm going to take a real quick break. We're going to hear from one of our sponsors, and we'll come right back.
LIA Administrators and Insurance Services, serving valuation professionals since 1978. We provide E&O insurance with a commitment to superior customer service, outstanding liability education, and unmatched claim defense, benefiting over 10,000 real estate professionals nationwide. Explore our exclusive appraiser liability education by Peter Christensen and cost-effective seminars designed to foster your growth. Our underwriters, with an average of 26 years of experience each, are dedicated to supporting appraisers. Visit liability.com to discover how LIA can safeguard your business.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the Appraisal Buzzcast. I'm Hal Humphreys, your host. I'm joined today by Kenon Chen, EVP of Strategy and Growth over at Clear Capital. Kenan, you know that a large portion of our audience is real estate appraisers, and a lot of appraisers are absolutely worried about these new policies issued by FHFA. What do these changes mean for appraisers?
What I'd love to try to do is provide some context to these announcements, which will hopefully bring down a bit of the the worry level, if you will, because you have to take these in context. I think if you just look at them, face value and say, oh no, the LTV, box, if you will, just went to the same as a traditional appraisal, and that's a big deal. But to provide some additional context, hopefully to help. Number one, LTV is not the only criteria by which a waiver is granted. There are a number of other additional controls that the GSEs have in place to decide whether or not a full appraisal waiver or whether an inspection-based waiver is offered on a particular loan. And of course, we don't know what all of those are, but there is one of the things we know is they're looking at the data they have. What do they already know about this property? And how confident are they in the last time that this property was observed? And whether or not that makes sense based on what they know. The second thing they look at, right, is they're looking at, remember, these are purchase loans only. So they're looking at the purchase contract amount. And this is why Fannie Mae changed the name from waivers to value acceptance, because what they're doing is they're looking at the purchase contract value and they're deciding based on all their risk-based models whether they accept that or not. So in a way, what they're kind of saying is that within the variance that they feel comfortable with is what the value of that property is. And if it's within their tolerance, then they feel comfortable with the data they have on that property, last time they know about condition or maybe other things, um, they're saying, okay, we accept that value. We don't need a new appraisal at that time. So by putting these extra controls in place, the actual impact of this is much smaller than you would imagine. This ends up being more of an evolution to an existing approach and policy as opposed to a revolution or disruption, right? So, I thought that mortgagefy.com did a really good article on talking about the exact numbers of purchase loans that might be affected, by this change. So for instance, for appraisal waivers, if those move from 80 to 90 LTV, for eligible loans, we're looking at today about 12.3% of purchase loans uh, receive an appraisal waiver, assuming that every single time they're offered, like so once it goes to 90 LTV, assuming that every single time an appraisal waiver is offered, a lender says, yes, I want an appraisal waiver, the utilization would move from 12.3% of purchase loans to 14.4%. So it'd only move up a couple percentage points if lenders said, yes, every single time I want an appraisal waiver. So I'm not dismissing that. I mean, that's still, 2,400 would-be appraisals a month that don't now need an appraisal. And I understand that affects appraisers, but again, just trying to add some context to what's the amount. Same thing with inspection-based waivers. If everyone accepted the offer when they're given an inspection-based waiver, and everyone decided not to order an appraisal but order an inspection-based waiver, again, we'd move from we'd move to, so let's see, I had that right in front of me, but we'd move up again like a few thousand loans a month. From right now only 1,600 inspection-based waivers are typically used a month, and that would move, up another 6,000 inspection-based waivers a month. So uh, it's not nothing. It isn't. It's certainly an evolution and an expansion of the program, but by far the overwhelming number of purchase loans still need a traditional appraisal, still need an appraiser involved. Um, and again, just taking a step back for a second and saying, okay, what's the point of these programs? Are they trying to replace appraisers? What's the goal here? And I think about, a couple things. One, the GSEs has been spending and investing a lot of money into two things. Number one, increasing market efficiency. So, which directly correlates to increasing capacity or ensuring that capacity is not a constraint in the speed of their ability to buy loans, to see loans be manufactured. Number two, they've been working on quality. And we know out of the housing finance crash, in 2008, one of the main goals of all these programs they put in place, including the UAD standard, the UCDP portal, ensuring everything's in XML format, has been about quality. And so, and they've learned a lot since looking at all these appraisals in digital format, where the issues are, where there's consistency things, how could they improve on the fidelity or of data, add more data point enumerations, less commentary, more things that are specifically measurable. Um, and so all of these programs over the years have been about increasing efficiency and about increasing quality. And it's really culminating, I think, in what we should really be looking at with a lot of anticipation and preparation, which is the UAD change next year. That actually is the biggest, most disruptive change to appraisal. And we have this opportunity right now to make stepping stones towards that, which is, embracing new data standards, embracing technology, and making sure that, that the approach um, is ready, if you will, that as an industry that we're ready to make this transition.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my kind of context view, and hopefully it's helpful to someone.
I think it's very helpful to place these things in context because taken as an independent, policy, some of these things do sound rather drastic. But when you stop and look at it with a clear head and look at the information available, it's not going to be as huge of an impact as a lot of appraisers are fearing, I think. Let's do this. I'm going to take a real quick break and we're going to hear from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back to talk about what all of this means for the GSEs, lenders, other stakeholders in the business.
Are you wondering how property insurance is changing in the wake of climate events and natural disasters? Need a primer on appraising religious properties? Want to learn how tech tools can streamline your workload? The Appraisal Institute's Trending Topics Thursdays webinar series is designed to help appraisers everywhere do their best work by keeping a pulse on industry trends, tools, and relevant skills. Join the Appraisal Institute as a member to gain access to our on-demand library of timely content featuring leading experts, or join us live for the next webinar. Live sessions are free to attend for members and non-members alike. Visit appraisalinstitute.org to explore the free webinar series.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Appraisal Buzzcast. I'm Hal Humphreys. I've got Kenon Chen with me today. Kenon, thank you again for taking the time to be here and talk through some of these policy changes that are coming down the pike. I do think, in the last segment you said the biggest, most disruptive change that appraisers are going to face in the near future is the new UAD protocol, the getting rid of all these various forms and having one interface. And the measurable data points expanding to include more measurable data points. I think you're right. I think that is the disruptive part. And I think for appraisers, the bulk of our listeners, getting ready for the new UAD is probably one of the most important things we can do. Now, Kenon, you mentioned appraisers getting on board with technology, measuring technology, things that are going to speed up the process through technological advances, what some people are calling appraisal modernization. I will say over at Appraisery Learning, we were part of the cadre of appraisal education businesses that got training specifically from Fannie Mae on the new UAD training. We will be offering that training to appraisers across the country starting after the first of the year. So I'm excited about that course offering and getting into the new UAD and helping appraisers get their heads around what this means for them. I'm curious, Kenon, again, appraisers, we tend to think in the appraisal space, and that's what we do. We do appraisals, we think about appraisals. What do these changes mean for the rest of the stakeholders in the mortgage process? And I'm thinking of lenders, GSEs, even home buyers, other people involved in the process. What do these changes mean for them?
Well, I love that you are already getting training in place and setting up a good program there. I think that's super important. Again, think about these changes, really as again as an evolution, as an iteration on what has already been available to lenders and consumers. And I think about it as it's adding choice, right? So it's saying, hey, if this loan is eligible for these programs because from a risk standpoint, a new appraisal is not required by one of the GSEs. It presents choice to the lender and to the consumer to reduce, cost to them. So obviously, as a borrower, you have some savings. Either, you're not paying for the appraisal at all because you get a waiver, or you're paying a reduced cost for property data collection. So there's certainly some borrower savings in there. And then the other piece is that there's some time savings, and I'll call it, earlier certainty, right? So if this is all about the purchase contract being accepted at value, you now have this opportunity to instantly know that value is not going to be an impediment to getting the loan at the amount that you need, and right up front as a borrower that you're not having to bring cash to the table. At close, you have to come up with. I was like, man, I already made the best offer I could. I've already used, the cash took me so long to save up in order to just get, competitive with my offer. Okay, I'm all right, and I can now, move forward and lock in with this lender and start, moving forward. So, I think those are the two biggest impacts is, cost, yes, and then certainty. Time is not as much of an issue as we know right now because we've got capacity in the industry, so we're not really dealing with elongated turn times.
Hmm.
So, but certainty right at, as close to point of sale as possible in the loan process, I think is important. Um, but choice is this is really about choice. Yeah.
Yeah, and as look, all of us out here who own homes, who have bought homes, we get, even if we're an appraiser, we get that feeling of you make an offer, it's accepted, you're comfortable with it, the seller's comfortable with it, and then there's always this nervousness about, is it going to come in? Is the appraiser going to come in at value, whatever? For some home buyers, for some borrowers, being able to know that bit of information sooner than later, I think, is a really key thing. And, Kenon, I think one of the things that we oftentimes forget is real estate appraisal, and I am an appraiser. We are a part of risk analysis by lenders, the GSEs, the secondary market. We're part of the risk analysis, and shifting the risk analysis to a more data-driven analysis package. It might seem scary for us as appraisers, but I really do believe, and I've said this so many times on this show and from stages across the country. When I got into this business, my dad told me, "Oh, you don't want to get into this business. There won't be appraisers in 5 years." Uh,
Hmm.
that was 35 years ago.
Hmm.
So I do believe that we will be around for quite some time as real estate appraisers, and I also believe, Kenon, that we're going to get the chance to flex our analytical muscles on the interesting projects.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely believe that appraisals will be around for a long time, that the need for appraisers will be there. I mean, to your point, if you look at the trajectory here, I mean, it took the GSEs 7 years essentially to get to this point and make this change to say that inspection-based waivers or property data collections will be available in the same LTV box as traditional appraisals. That, in other words, just to make them standard
Yeah,
or in the standard, it took them 7 years of piloting, testing, putting it in policy. So thinking of it another way, like if they had not made this standard, I'd be actually more worried because that would tell me that they were looking at some data and they were saying, oh man, this isn't working out the way that we thought, and maybe these things aren't as quality as we thought. And if they hesitated and paused, that would have been a way more of a concern to me and to the financial system than them saying, you know what, we're good now. We see all the data that we can, and we feel confident to make these just standard,
yeah,
not radical, but just standard with these additional controls. And if you look at the same time period, um, you know, since I'll use Uber, since we all like talking about the fear of Uber drivers, which by the way, we don't use Uber drivers. We use people that understand real estate, that are licensed, background checked, et cetera. Um, but um, but Uber started the year after the housing finance crisis. It started in 2009. In 2011, self-driving cars, the first self-driving cars were allowed to start testing. In 2018, ride-hailing services using self-driving cars got their first licenses to uh, start operating. Now, in San Francisco, Phoenix, and LA, you can take a fully autonomous self-driving car uh, to your destination, and you can put your life in the hands of technology in three major cities already. So, in the same space of time, it took us to put UAD in place to move appraisals from being paper-based to, using data standards to now just adding on, one more really kind of major change, which is, this idea of bringing the home to the appraiser instead of sending the appraiser to the home on every assignment. We've gone from regular taxis to fully self-driving cars. So I think the speed at which we're moving to both safeguard the financial system, to improve efficiency, quality, but doing it in a thoughtful, methodical way. I think we're moving at actually a slow pace, in comparison to other aspects of technology. And so, yeah, this next year will be important. I think the most important thing the appraisal industry can do and appraisers can do is to not stay stagnant. The most important thing is to continue to make progress, improve quality, improve experience, make the transition to use modern technology really smoothly. And then, yeah, absolutely, appraisers are needed for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Kenon, I really appreciate your perspective on these topics. Thank you for taking the time. Jim Morrison, are you going to try and trip us up with an anonymous appraiser question this
No,
week?
I'm letting everybody off the hook for the holiday season. So no anonymous appraiser question today. Kenon, we really appreciate your time. I know the appraisal waiver is such a hot button topic, and I appreciate you walking through it with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me and giving me the opportunity.
All right. If we don't have anything else for Jim Morrison and Kenon Chin, I'm Hal Humphreys, and that is your Appraisal Buzzcast for this week.